Breaking news here on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr, here with Ryan Snyder. Ryan, you said it earlier this off-season when we were talking about junior days. You don't expect to have a commitment, but every once in a while one pops up, and that's what we're doing today. So give us the information that everyone wants to know what is going on with Penn State football.
Yeah, big commitment here for them. Anthony Donkoh, I believe. I'm sorry, Anthony, if I mispronounced that. I'm terrible with names, if you guys haven't realized that already. 6'4", 310 offensive lineman out of Light Ridge High School in Aldie, Virginia, I believe it is. Solid prospect here. We have him as a 3-star, and one thing I would just say is that he's been steadily moving up Penn State's recruiting board here. Over the last, especially since the season, but definitely in recent weeks, recent months. He came up for Penn State's Junior Day on January 15th, and had a lot of good things to say about it. And here we are with a commitment. So solid pickup. I think he's going to be a tackle for them, 35-inch reach.
Yep.
Which is pretty good. I think that was a big thing that they wanted to get clarified during that visit, and they did. And, at 6'4", 310, he's kind of a swing guy, too. I don't know if I clarify him as a true tackle, but right now that's what I'm looking at him as.
Yeah, and I took a quick look at some of his film outside the highlights as well. It plays guard for his team, but he is a big physical, and you can see here, great athlete, well put together. But you're right, that 6'4" frame, he has some swing ability. But some of the things I noticed is athleticism, some of the technique issues he can get cleaned up, and then from a pass protection standpoint, there is not a whole lot on his film, and there's not a whole lot in his offense. So when it comes to an evaluation, of course, we'll have a T-Frank's film room coming up later next week as when I get all the deep dive into his film. Yeah. But first blush, great potential for an offensive lineman and a potential tackle, which we've talked about. That 35-inch reach, that's a big thing for the offensive line and what they're looking for there. Any other news or notes about Anthony that you've come across in talking to him today, and then a part of your kind of interview of him for his commitment?
4 offers so far, or it was 5 if you include Penn State, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Duke, and Liberty. Of course, Duke and Virginia Tech have had coaching changes there, so where exactly the new staff was pursuing, it was kind of hard to say. But West Virginia and Liberty both pushed hard recently, and Penn State feels like this was a player who was about to take off, and some of his recent offers and interest from other schools has kind of suggested that would be the case as well. But solid player, man. I'm still getting to know him. I'd be lying if I said I've been talking to Anthony for a long time. I know he's a 3.8 grade point average, which is great, of course. And, he made it clear that academics were a major part in this decision. He wants to major in mechanical engineering. So, obviously a great student, right? You're not doing mechanical engineering and playing football if you don't take things seriously. So,
no offense to our communication brethren, but if you're enrolling in communication at Penn State, it's just a different bar than mechanical engineering.
Yeah, for sure. So he mentioned, he spoke very highly of Phil Troutwine, of course, as you would expect. That relationship seems like it really took off here over the last, I'd say, a month or two. They've been talking longer than that. I mean, Penn State offered in beginning of December, and I got the impression they really started pursuing him a little bit before that. So we'll say November timeframe, and really as the season, or as Penn State's bowl season kind of came to an end and whatnot, relationship really took it to a different level. But he hasn't really visited many schools. Virginia Tech was really the only other school he saw. He went there for the Notre Dame game in October and came up for Penn State, fell in love with it, and boom, here we are. So I'll be curious to see if other schools do come calling down the road to try and get him on campus for a visit. But just my initial impressions for him is that he's just a great kid, really well spoken. I mean, seems like he has everything together off the field. There's no doubt about that. But it's just some guys who commit quick early. I'm just curious to see if they get other schools calling and they rethink some things. But good addition, man. Penn State seems to be very, very high on him. They've been speaking behind the scenes about how he's moving up for weeks now. So.
I would be high on somebody with 35-inch arms too. I mean, you look at it on film, you look at it, it's like, that's what you're looking for. So, speaking of the offensive line, Penn State has now put together a pretty impressive class, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Alex Birchmeyer and Joshua Miller are the 2 offensive linemen committed, with Mathias Barnwell an option to play offensive line, an option to play defensive line. How are you looking at the class so far and how it's put together?
A good start. I mean, there's a lot of work to do, but whenever you're able to get some quality guys like Avery and Birchmeyer, I mean, Birchmeyer is a legit 5-star candidate in my eyes, and Avery was arguably their top tight end target for the longest time. And then of course you have somebody in Barnwell who I just wrote about the other day. I feel like he's probably going to lean towards defensive tackle here now moving forward. So you have three quality prospects there at three important positions for Penn State. But there's a lot of work to do still too. So I think we're finishing up here with junior days. I think as we get into March and April and we have some of those personal visits, you'll see an uptick in commitments and guys making moves. But they've certainly put themselves in a good position to put together at least a top 15 class. I think top 10 is going to just be a little hard because there's not a ton of 5-star guys out there. And if you just look at how it works to get in the top 10, you really got to, especially for Penn State, they really need to have at least a 1 or 2 5-stars. So to me, Birchmeyer getting a 5th star would go a massive, massive way for them to having another top 10 class. But it's a great start, man. But, it's January 28th right now. So long way to go.
And just one follow-up question about this. How should Penn State fans, because this has been an emphasis for most Penn State fans, how should they feel about the work in the offensive and defensive line in the trenches? I mean, it seems like a great start to this class with some more opportunity to add more guys that are targets. There's a potential to add more there as well, right?
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, I've been talking about Evan Link for a long time. I mean, to me, he's a true bona fide offensive tackle prospect that's very high on Penn State's board. They have to land him, in my opinion. I think he's incredibly important. There's the Luke Montgomerys of the world who are out there, the Chase Basantes of the world. Yeah, I mean, they're going to be in the mix with them. I think it's going to be hard, though. And don't get me wrong. I mean, they're both incredibly important. Samson Okunlola, of course, too, who is just here. He's the highest ranked of all of them as a top 50. I think it's top 55 prospect nationally. I think he's number 2 in the on-3 consensus at tackle. So, they got to get at least, in my opinion, at least one of these guys as a true tackle prospect who's already pretty well technically. They have to land one, and preferably if they could get to 2, that'd be great. As far as defensive line, Jason Moore's coming up this weekend. He's right outside the 5-star range at the moment. I think he could be a 5-star by the time it's all said and done. And that's what I was talking about with landing 5 stars and being top 10. I just wrote about that last week. Jason Moore and Alex Birchmeyer, if Penn State wants to be top 10, I feel like both of those have to be obviously committed, of course, but they have to get into that 5-star range for Penn State to get over the hump. Just because the reason is just not as deep as is what we've seen in some previous years. So only time will tell. But Will Norman, John Walker, Derek LeBlanc, Justin Benton's a 3-star on 3 right now. But if you ask Penn State, I mean, they have him as a top 5 defensive tackle prospect. And then you have those elite defensive ends like Nicholas Harbor and Desmond Umezulo. Umezulo is really moving up the stats board quickly. He's another guy that'll be on campus for junior day. So they are laying the groundwork, but you got to close, right? And we're just under a year to go until signing day, and really closing time for them will be getting commitments in spring and in the summer, and then of course keeping a hold of them, which they've done a good job here in this last class. So only time will tell.
Ryan Snyder, a recruiting insider, giving us the information on the class of 2023 and the latest commitment for that class. Anthony Donkoh, the offensive line commit from, where was it again? Light Ridge High School.
Aldie, Virginia, I believe it is. So.
All right. Well, we'll get you to the rest of the BWI Daily Edition. Stay tuned for that. It's Friday, and that means Ryan Snyder joins the show, our recruiting insider. Another big weekend for Penn State football on the horizon. Ryan, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, which has been, I got to say, not the case over the last 2 weeks consistently. So excited for the show today.
Yeah, this is the grand finale, right, of the junior days, and even a 2022 guy coming on campus. So, signing day's next week. Like, normally, it's this used to be like the craziest week of my life. Getting ready to signing day, and now that's bumped into December. We'll still have a good bit of stuff to talk about, but it just feels weird because my whole life this was like the hectic week where you prep for everything, and now that's over with for the most part.
You always say something so interesting that I have to derail everything we have on the rundown and ask you a question. So, Junior Days, that's what we're talking about today. Did Junior Days also happen around National Signing Day at the same time in the previous calendar?
Well, I mean, years ago, February wasn't a dead period. So, like when I first
Oh,
started, for like the first half, probably more. I mean, February's only been a dead period for I want to say like 4 years or so now, maybe a little longer. I want to say about 4 years. I've been doing this. This is my 12th year, so I think it was about a third of that. And usually that's when you saw a lot of the junior days, because again, the national signing day, would go up to February, and everybody would really focus on, 20, senior prospects, we'll say, in January. Now you would have some, don't get me wrong. I mean, guys coming up for wrestling matches was something we saw a lot in Januaries over the years. And there were certainly plenty of sophomores and juniors coming up, but like the big junior day events, they used to be more so in February, but then,
gotcha.
you move up the calendar, and December becomes the real signing day, and everything just kind of got bumped up a month. And really coaches, from what I gathered, coaches were the ones who really wanted that February dead period. Because when I first saw it, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like that was always a great month for recruiting. But what I learned, at least from talking to Penn State people, was that like they needed a month to really focus on their team. Like
Right.
there's so many more months where they're putting so much focus into building the roster for the coming years, where they felt like they weren't able to really look back on the season, get ready for spring practice, and focus on the guys who are already here. So that's really how that February dead period started. I guess AFCA conferences kind of put that into motion, and now that's how our calendar works.
BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Ryan Snyder, our recruiting insider, dropping knowledge, history, and future, present, everything on the daily. And if you want to get more inside information, including some of the things we're going to talk about today, you can read those in depth at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Sign up for just $1. And if you subscribe and sign up, subscribe to Blue White Illustrated and subscribe to the YouTube channel, you get all of that, a package deal, Ryan, for $1. Because it's literally
Great
free to
deal.
click the button on the YouTube channel. So do it right now. We'll wait.
Shannon Terry put out today how we're 118% of what we were when we were with rivals, and Michigan's 122. So come on, guys, like this is our opportunity to beat Michigan, right? They're edging us out by 4%. So a couple more subscribers, we'd appreciate it. You never want to lose to Michigan. Come on.
Right? I have been pumping that message out on the YouTube channel for about a month now. Michigan and Notre Dame. I know Penn State fans also, the older ones, they love going back to competing with Notre Dame and stuff. So whatever it is, here's your opportunity to do it. But one of the things you wrote about this week was your conversation with Mathias Barnwell and an update on just his story. So tell us what you talked to him about and some of the interesting things that he had to say this week.
Yeah, well, the talk for the longest time is where's he going to play, right? 260 pounds. That as a junior in high school, that doesn't fit tight ends at the next level, and especially if you want to go into the NFL. So that's been the talk for the longest time. I mean, I think everybody's always been pointing to offensive tackle, and he's always said all the right things about I'll play wherever's best, and I want to do what's best for the team. But what we've really learned here is that defensive line is now kind of what everybody is focusing on. I know, when he opened up his recruitment, and he had a bunch of quality offers, and Notre Dame was one of them.
Yep.
And Notre Dame from the start really liked him as a defensive tackle, and that always intrigued me. Mainly because I didn't think Mathias was that interested in it, and maybe I was wrong, because now he's saying oh no, I'm actually kickstarting the defensive line talk with Penn State. He said flat in the story that he brought this up to them, and that they're all for it. So he came up for a junior day last weekend on the 22nd, and spent a lot of time with John Scott and Manny Diaz, and he raved about that experience. Fans can go read that story. So that feels like where he's focusing now. He was down a little bit in weight too, but I asked about that, if he's trying to lose weight or whatever it is, and he just said no, I'm playing basketball. And that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
When you switch over to basketball and all that running you do in that sport, it makes sense that he would shed a handful of pounds. So that seems to be kind of where we have him listed as an athlete at On3, and I'll probably keep him there for a little while, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the spring we're switching him to defensive line. The one thing I really want to figure out is edge or defensive tackle. And of course, with his size, everything points to defensive tackle as a 3 technique. But just people have mentioned to me that he's interested as maybe like a big defensive end too. So that'll all get worked out with time. But to me,
he wants to be as close to a skill position as he can be. It seems
exactly
like edge, tight end. He wants one of those positions, and I get it. But the thing I said about offensive tackle, say about 3 technique, you can be a superstar at 3 tech with his skills. That's actually the next thing I wanted to ask you about is with his recruiting and with his position and being an athlete, a little bit I think under ranked right now with on 3. And I know that a lot of that has to do with it's still in development and process, but if he were to switch to one of those positions, do you think there is more opportunity for him to be a higher ranked prospect in the future?
I think getting out the camps is how that's going to happen.
Gotcha.
Right? I mean, from what they've seen, and I mean, of course, we have a whole senior season to go still.
Yeah.
But like Mathias hasn't really been someone we've seen at camps, and that's not his fault. It was, we had a pandemic that shut all those camps down, and he just wasn't able to make it out to many of them this past season. Of course, Virginia played a spring season of football, so that was a big part of it, where he was playing a handful of games in the spring this past year. So I think if he's able to make it out to Under Armour camps and the opening camps or whatever camps they are, that'll give people a much better idea on just kind of how he could be a defensive lineman and go against some of those top prospects out there. I mean, the camps are why I denied Dennis Sutton as a 5-star, without a doubt. I mean, he came to Rivals camp and freaking crushed it.
Yep.
And we already were really high on him, but as you talked about, remember denied Dennis Sutton as a sophomore,
yes.
And then he go through the pandemic and he just gets shredded, and then he comes to these camps and is dominant, and that's where it all started. And I'll give Rivals credit for that because they saw that with their camps, they saw that ahead of a lot of us. Well, I mean, of course, I was at Rivals, but ahead of 247 at the time before On 3 started, and that's where that all started. And I think that if Mathias was able to go out to some of those camps and have some good showings, it would absolutely help him. So we'll see what happens. He's playing basketball right now, and camp season in the Northeast really gets going at the end of April. So he should, the calendar should be free for it to work this year.
And full disclosure, the reason I ask is because he's one of my favorite prospects I've watched on film for Blue White Illustrated. So I'm very high personally on Mathias. I think he's got great talent and potential at the next level. At the next level. So I'm curious. I've been very excited to watch his development throughout his career, and that's one of the things I've been wondering personally about his kind of growth and development and his profile and prestige and all of that stuff. So he's not the only guy making news this week. Penn State has been giving out quite a few offers. So can you give us a rundown of, there's been a flurry of them online. If you've been checking out Greg Pickle and Ryan Snyder on Twitter, they've been following a bunch of these guys. Give us a rundown of what Penn State's been up to this past week.
Yeah, well, it started with the junior day this past weekend, and Michael Kilbane was pretty good linebacker, defensive end. I think he's more of a defensive end at the next level. We have him as a linebacker on 3, but from what I've gathered, he's probably more of a defensive end. From St. Edward in Lakewood, Ohio, I mentioned in the podcast I did with Greg, I saw him play against Drew Aller actually in his playoff game. He had 2 sacks on Drew that game and was a pretty good player. At the time, I thought he was more of like a MAC level player, so I didn't put as much attention into him as I wish I would have. I was really looking at Ben Roebuck, who's an offensive tackle from St. Edward that Penn State offered in that game, and I just wish I would have focused on Mike a little bit more. But anyway, I mean, Jay-Sean Ross is an edge rusher from St. Pius in Kansas City they offered. I can just roll through them all. Cameron Cook from Stony Point, running back out of Texas. Deshaun Dotson, not Jahan. From Newman Goretti's a defensive lineman. He'll be somebody I think we talk about a good bit. He's a Pennsylvania guy, and he's really been blowing up here in recent weeks. Daniel Harris, Greg Pickle did a good story on him. He's a cornerback out of Miami. And then, of course, Cameron Butler. Well, we didn't mention Cameron Butler. He's a Miami of Ohio graduate, or I think he's going to be a graduate transfer in the portal that Penn State offered. I believe he's as an edge, so that'll be something to watch here. As they move through. I mean, there's a handful of other guys I can name. What I would say that's interesting is this is the final week of the contact period. So This is Penn State's last chance to get out on the road, meet with a bunch of these coaches of players who they've been scouting for a long time. They like their film. They've gathered enough information about academics and things of those sorts. And that's why you're seeing a flurry of offers go out between now and really, since the contact period began in January 15th. So, I'd be lying if I said I knew a ton about some of these guys from Kansas City and Texas.
Right.
Those relationships
Why don't you know
will have
everything?
to just be built.
Ryan,
Yeah,
come
I
on.
wish. I used to pretend I did, and then we had this talk last week, right? It doesn't usually do any good. I will say Carter Stottmeyer is a cornerback out of Plano, Texas. He did visit Penn State last weekend, and he got an offer then on Thursday or I think around noontime. I believe Terry Smith's down there this week. I don't have as much coach information this week as I had in some previous weeks, just as I'm really trying to focus on this big junior day. But he was a player who was just up a couple, just this past weekend, and somebody I think we'll be talking about a bit. Whenever you make that trip up from Texas, there's real interest there. And Penn State's one of 5 schools to offer so far, with Arizona, Mississippi State, Kansas, and Jackson State. So we have him at 5'11". He checked in at 5'11", 170 this past week. So he'll be somebody I'd probably reach out to once the contact period. Once we get past junior day and things slow down a little bit in February, I'll circle back to him.
I want to circle back myself to one of the guys you mentioned, the transfer from Miami of Ohio that Penn State offered, Cam. What was his last name?
Cam Butler.
Butler. I was going to call him Cam Bright. That's definitely not the same guy. Cam Butler from Miami of Ohio. I'm not going to ask you about Hunter Norzad, but despite the fact that things are shut down for Penn State to actually enroll players, we're going to see more information over the next couple of months about offers and things like that, right? I mean, it's not going to be no information. It's just a delay in when they can enroll if they choose.
Yes and no. I mean, because look, a lot of guys are also starting classes. Like Cam Butler is starting classes, and he knew he wanted to get his degree and move on as a grad transfer. So that's why you're hearing about him now. And I think you will hear about some other guys similar to that situation. I mean, but also when we get into February and you get into the beginning of March, it usually kind of slows down because those guys are there because they want to focus on spring ball, right? You're usually not getting to the end of February and saying, screw it, I'm out of here before spring ball starts, right? So I do think that it will slow down a bit here probably over the next 6-7 weeks or so. We'll have spring ball happen. You usually don't hear a lot then. And then, of course, when you get to, beginning to mid of April, the cycle starts all over again. And, guys who didn't win I don't want to say didn't win a position battle, but, the writing's on the wall, right? You're probably not going to be the starter next year. That's when you see things change again. So we'll see. But, we have Butler. We know Penn State's after him. Hunter Norzad, Tyler Steen. Norzad and Steen are offensive tackle or offensive line prospects, and Butler looks like a solid defensive end. Butler, I'm trying to pull up his stats here. He played 30 games over the last couple of years, 114 tackles, 31 tackles for loss, 16 sacks. He was all MAC. Let me see. The last couple of years, he was all MAC. First team. I think he was first team this past year too. So decent player. Somebody I've been trying to get to know all these transfer guys. They don't seem to be very interested, which I understand, right? I mean, they deal with the media after games. No one's seeking out the media when you're 22, 21, whatever it is then. So I get it. But he'll be somebody, we definitely stay in touch with Penn State sources about and try and learn more.
So we're going to get to the junior day here in just a little bit, but as we get towards the end of the contact period, what other things might Penn State fans see happening from recruiting as this wraps up?
More offers, I guess. Guys go out and, I'm sure they're visiting a ton of schools with players they haven't offered yet. So, they're collecting academic information from, Franklin says the janitor, he's out there collecting all the information he can on guys that they have interest in. So you will see more offers go out. But as I mentioned, when we flip the page to February, they do really try to start focusing more on their team. So recruiting does take a bit of a backseat. Now, of course, guys get out of school at 2:30. They're done with basketball practice at 4. In that night, then they're recruiting hard. All the text messages, all the phone calls, the Zoom calls. So that electronic recruiting still continues, but they're not reviewing you'll have your recruiting staff reviewing film all the time, but
Right.
someone like Taylor Stubblefield is going to be watching, Parker Washington to find improvements with him.
Yep.
Same Phil Troutwine's going to be trying to find improvements with his offensive lineman. Like the staff really kind of shifts their focus more so to the team throughout February as we get ready for March. That's really what it is. So recruiting does take a bit of a backseat in February, but you'll still see offers going out and guys dropping their top 10s and things of that sort. But it's a slower 4 weeks compared to pretty much the rest of the year.
Another big week here at Blue White Illustrated and at On3 as the final rankings are updated for not just On3 but also for Rivals and for 247. So that affects the On3 composite, and there's been a lot of stuff happening this week with the rankings, and they've been changing almost continually. Do we have a little more clarity as the dust finally settled for the most part on where players have landed for On3 and for the consensus this week?
We know the top guys,
Okay.
and that's pretty much settled, because Rivals put out their top 250 list, 24/7, pretty much updated their top 24/7 or 247 guys is what it is. So that those guys who've steadily been in those top 250 lists, top 300 lists, they're pretty much done. So Nick Singleton, Drew Aller, Denai Dennis Sutton, Caden Saunders, Katron Allen, I'm trying to think who else went, Drew Shelton, Abdul
Right.
Carter, Mekhi Flowers, those guys who have been there, I don't see them changing much. The way that 24/7 and Rivals do it is they kind of spread their announcements out a little bit. I'm sure 24/7 is still kind of changing some things with their high 3 stars, low 4 stars. Rivals kind of doing the same thing. And so are we too. I mean, things will kind of be shifting a little bit here. You just can't enter all the data in one day, right? I mean,
Right.
There's so many players
Right.
that it just simply takes time to update everyone's profile. So I would say that when you're looking at those top guys, the top 200, top 300 guys, like they're pretty much set. Like I expect, Denai, for example, is now the highest ranked guy in this class at number 22. I don't see that changing.
Yep.
Drew Shelton, and for example, he's 22 in the On3 consensus. So let me clarify that. And Drew Shelton's number 129 in the On3 consensus. That's not really going to change. What I'm curious to see is kind of what does like some place like Rivals do with KJ Winston. We have on On3, we have KJ much higher now. He had, I think, the second biggest jump, or maybe the biggest jump of everybody, moving up like 60, 70 spots, I believe it was. Does Rivals move him around in the coming days? And that's really kind of what we're seeing. So watch the guys there in that second half of the list and see if there's a movement there. I've been checking it every day. There hasn't been a ton yet, but that really just because our On3 team has to find that information and then enter it, and it takes time. So I would think that by the weekend or early Monday, it should be finalized.
And as somebody who has done data entry professionally before, it takes
grueling,
time.
Yeah.
And of course, as well as one of the people that enters data on a regular basis for the On3 database. And just a quick clarification for fans or for people who don't know, On3 does something I think is pretty cool and pretty smart. So you have the On3 rankings, which are the ones that we put together, and Charles Power is the lead guy for On3 and giving all of our opinion as a company on these players and where they rank. But the smartest people also take an idea of what everyone else is saying and factor that in. So the On3 consensus is a weighted consensus of all of the major recruiting services, split evenly, so that it gives you the best idea, as Ryan talked about, of where people are moving players and how the general field looks at these football players. So if you look and you don't know which one to look at, make sure if you're looking at Drew Shelton or if you're looking at Caden Saunders, there's the top one, which is the On3 first, and then the consensus is second on their profile. So just
correct.
Keep
Actually,
that.
Nope. Opposite.
Thank you.
It's consensus and then On3 in the second. It says it right there. I mean, you can't miss it. On3 consensus and then On3. But
just make sure you read it. That's the point. Is like if you're speed reading like me, if you're a guy that's like kind of scanning the page, you might get confused at times. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because we've had even people that are on the Blue White Illustrated message board have been talking to us about, wait, I'm confused.
Oh, I mix it up. Yeah,
me too.
I mix it up. It's fine.
I literally just did.
so many numbers, I mix it up myself, but yeah, one thing I'll add there is just like, obviously the 240, I keep saying 247 for some reason. 24/7 has their composite, and they kind of started that mindset. Of course, Shannon Terry started that company.
Yeah.
And the thing with 24/7s is it's I believe it's 50% 24/7s, 25% Rivals, 25% ESPN, where ours is just 25 for each of the four. And I don't believe 24/7. They don't include On 3 in their composite yet. I'm sure at some point they'll probably change that. But that's just is what's kind of unique about this compared to the composite for 24/7. It's just that it is an even between ESPN, Rivals, 24/7, and On 3. So that's I really enjoyed it. It was the first time I've had a consensus composite kind of ranking to look at. And at first I was always like, I kind of want to stick with our company's thing. But as I've learned it and grown to appreciate it more, I think it's definitely the best way to go. And I like that our team rankings are based off the consensus as well, because it's the ultimate team ranking, right? It's everybody's thoughts. It's Steve Wilfong's thoughts. It's Adam Friedman's thoughts. Everybody's thoughts put into one ranking, and that should be what we would consider the ultimate team ranking.
So that is something to keep a look at as that develops over the next couple of weeks. But coming up in the immediate future, tomorrow, Penn State Junior Day. This is the last one. This is the biggest one. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with a list? Do you want to start with the things that are important this weekend? What's the most important thing to you about Saturday?
The list. The list. Because I mean it's a stacked list, right? I mean, and that's huge. I mean, I wish I had all the numbers to be here. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I have 19 scholarship guys confirmed at the moment, which is similar to what we had the first week. But that's going to add, like, there's always a couple guys I don't get. I think I'm good at my job, but I'm always going to miss somebody when you're trying to put these kind of lists together here. So I would just say that the high caliber guys are most interesting. For example, Jason Moore is on campus Friday. He won't be able to make it for the junior day, but Penn State's able to get him on campus for a visit. And, Jason is one of their top defensive line prospects out of DeMatha. It's a pretty defensive line heavy group. Jameel Lyons out of Roman Catholic is a player who just crushed it at their camp earlier in the year. I think he'll be a defensive tackle at the next level. And he put out some incredible numbers. Of course, Nicholas Harbor. Everybody's seen what he did the other week with a 2079 200 meter. He's I don't know. I mean, I can't think of a high school athlete who's more freakishly gifted than Nicholas Harbor. I mean, over the years, I'm not talking about just his class. I mean, I don't know. He looks back in the day.
He looks more athletically gifted than Adafe Owe, just on first blush, and that is a high bar.
Yeah, incredibly. So. I mean, there's so many guys, though. Deshaun Womack's a really good defensive lineman out of St. Francis. DJ Samuels and Sadir Mitchell out of Bergen Catholic, or, high 3-star, low 4-star kind of guys that Penn State's been after for a long time. So it's a really good defensive line class that's coming up here. We also have someone like Tony Rojas, who I've been talking about for a long time. I consider him one of Penn State's top 3 linebacker prospects in this class. He's another guy who just incredibly gifted athletically. He put up some awesome numbers. I think it was like a 4.6 and a 4.5, a 4.640 and a 4.5 shuttle at Penn State's camps. Really runs well.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other guys too that have been here on campus. So this is, they have been, if you couldn't make it January 15th, they have been pushing everybody to this junior day to try and get a stack full of talent on campus together. And it's coming out that way too. So speaking of freaks, DK Metcalf's cousin, TJ Metcalf, he'll be up. I mean, he's not anywhere as freaky as DK is right now.
Who knows? Maybe he'll hit a growth spurt because he's just a little shorter.
Yeah, just a little bit. We have him at 6 foot, but I mean, just he's coming up from Alabama. So I mean. There's guys coming from outside the region for this one, and there's some really good young guys too. Real quick, I'll mention Tony Sacca's son, Anthony Sacco. He's a really good safety prospect. I watched him in the 6A championship game in PIAA's. I thought he was excellent. I thought he was the best player for St. Joseph Prep. They lost to Pine was it Pine Trafford? Penn Trafford, excuse me, in that game that night. But as a freshman, man, I really couldn't find too many other players in that St. Joseph prep team that impressed me more that night. Gideon Davidson is like, okay, I'm not going to compare him to Nick Singleton, but like he's a young little freshman. He's kind of like, he's already showing signs that he could be an Ox. He's a really impressive looking player out of Liberty Christian Academy. He'll be coming up. And then those are both 2025 guys, by the way. Camden Lawden Slocker. Camden, I think I got your name right. I apologize if I didn't.
It's a good attempt.
Camden and I have talked about this before. He's actually from Harrisburg, so I've known him from a distance. He's down at McDonough now. I watched him when I went down to see Denai Dennis Sutton. I've talked about this before. Camden's playing defensive end, and Mason Robinson are playing defensive end. Both are going to be Division I players, and that was kind of why Denai was playing defensive tackle at the time, just because there was so much talent around him. But all those guys are just freshmen. Camden doesn't have an offer from Penn State yet. I'd be shocked if it doesn't come soon. He's the real deal. Luke Hamilton and Cooper Cousins then are some really good 2024 offensive linemen. Cooper Cousins, of course, is from Erie, PA. He's from McDowell, and I expect him to be a highly coveted prospect in 2024. So it's a deep list of guys, man, and they are going to go hard at this week. Do I see a commitment coming right now? Nah, I really don't.
Right.
But we haven't had a surprise for the first two junior days, and it does happen. I mean, I do think Tony Rojas is probably leaning towards Penn State, or at least I thought he was before he went and visited Virginia Tech, and I believe North Carolina was the other school. So maybe those visits have changed some things, but leading into 2022, I definitely thought that he's leaning towards Penn State. So he'd be a guy I guess you could circle, but I don't see Nicholas Harbor or some of these other freak players committing anytime soon.
Yeah, if they did, that would be the upset of the weekend and probably the year as far as getting one of those high-end guys to commit so early in the process. What is, outside of that, the best-case scenario for Penn State?
So, I mean, you're saying like outside of commitments this weekend?
Right, outside of commitments, what are they hoping for? What's the best-case scenario that they come out of this weekend and they get a feeling, or they get talks with guys and they feel great about that? What is the best case that they can get?
They'll sit down with guys and have, those one-on-one one-on-one heart-to-heart kind of conversations. And guys will absolutely admit to them, hey, I'm leaning this way. This is kind of my timeline. They have those in-depth, straight to the point kind of conversations. So getting a good feel for where they stand with the Jason Moores, the Tony Rojas's, the Nicholas Harbors, that's what I would expect to come out of it. And then you kind of know how to attack other players at that position moving forward. You don't stop because until they're signed, you can't really stop. But I think that's the main thing, and also there's going to be a handful of guys coming up here who have never been here before too. So getting accurate measurements on them and just getting a feel for their character, their personalities, how they would fit that locker room. I think that's a big part of this too. But, T-Frank, when we did our first Junior Day podcast like 2 Fridays ago, one thing I was saying is like these events really don't lead to those commitments because they're not the one-on-one whole 3-4 hour experiences. What you see in March then when a guy comes up for spring practice, watches spring ball, and then the whole rest of the time he's on campus, he has the whole staff not at his call, but you know what I mean? But like they get that real true one-on-one time, and those are the visits that like guys like they'll make a sudden decision, I guess you would say. Where this is, with all the defensive linemen coming here, I mean, John Scott's room is going to be crowded on Saturday when they're going through film and talking to guys. So you just don't have that quite that personal experience in these, and that's why you don't see as many commitments. But it should be. I mean, there's a lot of guys here where it should put them in good positions moving forward.
So speaking of somebody who's never been to campus, and we've talked about this now for a couple of weeks on the BWI Daily Edition here on Friday, is Vega Ioane. One of the things that creates a great dramatic story is an element of time and urgency. And his recruiting has been in fast forward over the last couple of days. So what's the update there, and what's your sense of what you've learned since we first heard about Vega getting an offer from Penn State?
I should send a text out right now to see if he's actually on the plane, right? Like he should be coming in to make sure he's coming. But yeah, I mean, all signs are pointing to him. being here this weekend. UCLA, we know, was pushing hard to try and steal that visit, I guess you would say. I do know he did go to Washington again. I don't know. He was at the Poly Bowl, so I would assume it was right before the Poly Bowl. Maybe I didn't exactly clarify when, but I did clarify that he was at Washington. And Washington kept their offensive line coach. He was previously committed to Washington, and he's from outside of Seattle. So, from a proximity to home perspective, that makes the most sense. But he wouldn't be flying out here on the last weekend before National Signing Day if there wasn't real interest. I know Phil Troutwine did a visit with his family this past Monday, and all indications were that it really went well. That's what basically locked up this visit. I know the family thought highly of Trout from what I was told. So it looks good. Whenever you get somebody this time of the year, man, you're the last visit. Signing Day's 6 days away. We can point back to quite a few other instances in the past where it leads to a commitment. Now, this guy's coming from the whole other side of the country, and that big school in that state is also who, he was previously committed to. So it's hard for me to, put in a pick right now and think, he's coming to Penn State. But Penn State seems to be feeling pretty good about it. Their whole thing was, get him here, and we feel like we can get him. So he's coming. So let's see what happens.
So that it's going to be a big weekend for that outside of Junior Day, and that might give us some clarity going into the signing day about which way all of that is leaning. And, of course, if you want all that information from Ryan as he gets it, it's on the message board. Blue White Illustrated message board, the Lions Den. Sign up for just $1, and you get access to all this stuff. If you love these Friday shows and you love getting this stuff and hearing it from Ryan, you can have that just IV'd into your body at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Sign up for just $1. All week I've been saying, you can listen to me right now, scroll down in the video, and I'll basically be guiding you to the link. It's the first one after all of the words. Join on 3. It's $1. It's awesome. Ryan, anything else before we close out the show? What are you doing this weekend?
Well, it's my niece's 1-year-old birthday, so I actually got to go to Harrisburg for her, big 1-year birthday party. This is what happens when you got kids, right? My 4-year-old turned 4 last weekend.
Yeah.
Every
weekend's birthday's in Harrisburg.
Yeah, we all matched up to have our kids around the same time. I don't know how that happened, but anyway. Yeah, so that'll be my Saturday, driving down to Harrisburg for a 1-year-old birthday party, and then plugging my laptop in at 4 o'clock and grinding. That's basically how it is. So hopefully I can take the day off sometime next week. But that's okay, man. This is a fun job, and I enjoy these days. These are why fans pay for these sites, right? To have the information we get out of these junior days and to get it to you guys. It's a fun job. I enjoy it. So busy weekend, but that's okay. February will slow down. We'll have some time for family time then.
What's your niece's name?
My niece's name?
Yeah.
I don't know if should I be putting that out there. I don't know.
Oh, right. Well, I wanted to say happy birthday. That was all. I didn't think that's a very good point. Happy
my
belated
kids are Hayden and Cameron. I don't know if my brother wants me putting all those things out on YouTube, but
well, fair enough.
Anyway, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I wanted to wish a belated happy birthday to your son and to your niece and be very pandery here.
Hayden's birthday was awesome. We went to Get Air in Harrisburg. It's like a trampoline park. But this way, I took a dozen 4-year-olds to a trampoline park and fed them cupcakes and pizza, man. So you want to talk about a 2-hour? You want to film Ryan pulling his hair out? That would have been entertaining. So, yeah.
Well, good luck with more of that this weekend. Of course, you're not the one steering the bus. You're there for the party, right?
Yeah. No alcohol though, so I'm just kind of sitting there eating cake with my kids again, feeding my kids more sugar. Anyway.
Well, we'll be back on Monday here on the BWI Daily Edition, and of course, Ryan will be back on the show next week to give us an idea of everything going on. Of course, it's going to be heading into the dead period, but that's not going to stop us from having a good time. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you on Monday.